An Intellectual Autobiography, From Mathematics Through Physics to Both Engineering and Medicine Part 2, number 1724, July 21, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, Category, Research Journey. The continued evolution of my engineering-based medical research. My engineering approach to medical research did not stop with viscoplastic medicine theory, following my hemorrhagic stroke in 2025. My thinking continued to evolve as I reconnected with engineering and mathematics concepts that I had learned decades earlier, approximately 3 months after my stroke. While walking alone in a park, through neuroplasticity, I suddenly recalled a mathematics course that I had studied in Taiwan in 1967, topology. That memory immediately suggested a new direction for my medical research work. Viscoplasticity had already provided a framework for understanding the internal structural changes occurring within biomedical systems. Topology, on the other hand, offered a way to study changes in external geometry, structural connectivity, and relationships among data. Data science, or data structure, naturally became the bridge linking these two perspectives together. Viscoplasticity and topology allowed me to examine both the internal evolution of disease and the hanging relationships and geometric patterns among physiological variables. Long before my stroke, beginning around 2010, I had already incorporated signal analysis and wave theory from physics into my medical research. However, after my stroke, I also began to appreciate another important connection from my engineering career. For more than 20 years, I worked extensively in semiconductor chip design. Gradually, I recognized striking similarities between semiconductor circuits and the human brain and nervous system. Individual transistors resemble neurons, while the electrical interconnections among transistors resemble the neural pathways of the brain. From this perspective, many concepts from electronic engineering, including signal transmission, waveform analysis, sensing, amplification, communication, and feedback control, also have meaningful analogies in neuroscience and physiological regulation. Another important insight occurred in March 2026 while I was recovering in Hawaii. I found myself thinking about Newton's second law of motion, F equals m times, or rather F equals m plus a. I asked myself the simple question: why did Newton choose multiplication instead of addition? That question led me to reconsider the 4 basic arithmetic operations that I had first learned in elementary school at age 5. Addition and subtraction increase or decrease final quantities. Division often serves as a normalization process, allowing variables with different units or scales to be compared on a common basis. Multiplication, however, has another important role. It amplifies the combined effect of multiple contributing factors. Surprisingly, despite learning arithmetic throughout my education, no teacher had ever explained these operations to me from this engineering perspective. In medicine, most interactions among pathophysiological input variables are multiplicative rather than additive or weighted additive. In chronic disease dynamics, risk factors often act as synergistic amplifiers rather than simple cumulative burdens. This logic underpins my triggering sensitivity index TSI for my stroke risk. TSI stroke equals glucose 120 *SBPD BP 45 *SBP 120 *120. This realization directly inspired the development of my triggering sensitivity index TSI for risks of mortality diseases. Instead of combining risk factors through simple addition or weighted addition like Framingham or ASCVD risk scores, I used normalized variables connected through multiplication. In my engineering interpretation, multiplication represents amplification. As a result, deterioration in one critical factor can magnify the influence of the others, producing a much more sensitive representation of TH overall system state. This concept became the mathematical foundation of my TSI models. Initially, I applied the TSI concept to estimate my stroke risk. Subsequently, I extended the same mathematical framework to type 2 diabetes. More recently, I have begun developing TSI models for cardiovascular disease (CVD) and chronic kidney disease (CKD). My current objective is to provide quantitative evidence explaining why my cardiovascular disease and chronic kidney disease gradually disappeared at the organ function level. After 17 years of intensive lifestyle intervention, my engineering question is straightforward. If my 17 years long-term pathophysiological inputs change, how should the corresponding CVD and CKD risk outputs respond? To investigate this question, I am constructing 3 hypothetical scenarios. The first uses my actual observed data, in which both biomarkers and lifestyle factors improved substantially over time. The second assumes that these physiological inputs remained essentially unchanged. The third assumes only modest physiological deterioration over time. Comparing these 3 scenarios helps demonstrate, in quantitative terms, how long-term changes in pathophysiological inputs influence long-term organ function and ultimately affect health outcomes and expected lifespan. Looking back over the past several decades, I now recognize that my medical research has continuously expanded by integrating additional branches of mathematics, physics, and engineering. It began with static mechanics, progressed through dynamic viscoplasticity, later incorporated topology, signal analysis, wave theory, electronic engineering ideas, semiconductor system concepts, sensing, feedback control, and mathematical modeling, and ultimately evolved into an integrated engineering framework for studying chronic disease. Each new concept was not introduced to replace the previous one. Instead, each became another tool for understanding the same objective: my own pathophysiology of chronic metabolic disease, mortality diseases I have suffered, and the engineering principles governing its progression, prevention, and possible functional recovery. Conclusion: as I look back over both my professional career and my medical research, I now recognize that the true foundation of my thinking has never been engineering alone. Mathematics is the deepest foundation. Physics builds upon mathematics by describing the governing laws of nature. Engineering applies those mathematical and physical principles to solve practical problems. Medicine, in my view, occupies a similar level as engineering. It is another applied discipline that seeks to understand, predict, and improve the behavior of one of the most complex systems in nature, the human body. For this reason, I do not view my work as simply applying engineering concepts to medicine. Rather, I am applying the same mathematical and physical principles that underlie both engineering and medicine. Engineering happened to be my professional training, while medicine became my personal research subject. The scientific foundation of both engineering and medicine, however, is the same. This realization explains why so many seemingly different disciplines have gradually become integrated into my medical research: solid mechanics, fluid dynamics, topology, signal analysis, wave theory, semiconductor systems, electronic sensing, feedback control, and mathematical modeling are not independent ideas competing with one another. They are different perspectives for studying the same pathophysiologic system. Looking back over the past 17 years, I now recognize that my medical research has not been a sequence of unrelated discoveries. It has been a gradual uncovering of a common scientific foundation. Each new mathematical, physical, or engineering concept simply revealed another aspect of the same biomedical reality. Perhaps the most unexpected lesson from this journey is that the human body does not recognize the traditional boundaries between mathematics, physics, engineering, and medicine. Those boundaries exist primarily in our educational systems and academic departments. Nature itself obeys only its own laws. My research has therefore been an attempt to understand chronic disease and certain mortality diseases by following those natural laws across disciplinary boundaries. If this framework proves useful, it will not be because it belongs to engineering or medicine. It will be because it is ultimately grounded in mathematics and physics, a universal language through which we describe the natural world. I hope this conclusion elevates my paper from engineering applied to medicine to a broader philosophy. Mathematics is the foundation. Physics describes nature. And both engineering and medicine are parallel applications of those same underlying principles. That is a more fundamental statement and, in my opinion, better reflects what I have been trying to communicate throughout this manuscript. This paper explains how a lifetime of mathematics, physics, engineering, and personal experience with chronic disease gradually evolved into an integrated scientific framework for studying human physiology and pathology. Epilogue: as I look back over my research journey, I recognize that my approach differs from much of today's medical research. That difference is intentional, and I have no reason to apologize for it. I know the world is filled with intelligent people and highly capable researchers. However, my own educational and professional path has allowed me to integrate mathematics, physics, engineering, psychology, and medicine into a single framework. This multidisciplinary background naturally leads me to ask different questions and view biological systems, including biomedicine, botany, zoology, soil science, and even the suffering of prisoners of war pose from a different perspective. I also recognize that many readers today may not immediately agree with my methods or conclusions. That does not concern me. I did not write these papers to seek recognition, acceptance, fame, power, or financial reward. Those have never been my objectives. My purpose is much simpler: to record, as honestly and accurately as possible, what I have observed, what I have learned, and how I arrived at my conclusions. If readers find these ideas useful, they are welcome to build upon them. If they disagree, they are equally free to set them aside. Scientific understanding should never depend upon authority or popularity, but upon careful observation, logical reasoning, and objective evidence. Perhaps my intended audience is not limited to today's readers. Scientific knowledge continues to evolve, and future generations may possess perspectives available to us today. Just as I found new inspiration in Newton's equation, F equals ma, more than 3 centuries after it was first published. Perhaps some in 50 or 100 years from now may discover value in ideas that seem unconventional today. Words and knowledge can travel across both time and space, passing from one generation to the next. My research philosophy begins with a simple principle. I do not begin with n equals many. I begin with n equals 1, that one person happens to be myself. Because my first responsibility was to understand my own disease well enough to preserve my own life. Only after a system has been thoroughly understood from the inside out do I believe it is intellectually honest to ask whether the same principles apply more broadly, such as to n equals 2, 3, or many. In my view, depth of understanding must come before breadth of generalization. If I cannot honestly claim to understand one complete physiological system, I have no foundation for claiming that I understand thousands or millions. This is the major difference between my research approach and that of many other medical researchers. This philosophy has guided every paper I have written over the past 17 years. In engineering, I don't test a complex prototype by averaging the performance of 1,000 different designs. I analyze one well-instrumented system thoroughly to understand its underlying governing equations. Understanding the precise feedback loops, inputs, and outputs of one person, myself, over 17 years provides a depth of mechanistic clarity that broad population statistics often average out and obscure. Whether history ultimately validates or rejects these ideas is beyond my control. My responsibility is only to leave behind a truthful record of my observations, my reasoning, and my scientific journey. Future readers can then examine the evidence, evaluate the logic, and reach their own conclusions. For me, that is the meaning of scientific honesty. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.